Hi everyone, Sarah Hay here with Bob Clements International, and today, Bob Clements, welcome.
Hey, they let me out again to do another vlog, so I was excited. I'd been put in vlog the penalty box, and I'm back out, so I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, every once in a while we do let him out on good behavior, so here we are today, here we are. Hey, so today we want to talk about something really important that has been at the top of our minds, and we're sure yours as well, and that's around the concept of inflation and what we're dealing with inflation right now. And specifically, Bob, I know you've been having a lot of conversations with your dealers and dealer success groups about this, but there were three big areas we wanted to talk about today. And the first one is around margins. So What are we doing right now to help our dealers with margins and the inflation that's happening?
Well, again, that's the big thing. So we've been working with the dealers in our dealer success groups now for probably about 3 months and really getting them to understand that inflation's here. Now, again, some people say it's transitory. Some people say it's going to be here long term. I'm a little bit in the belief that it's going to be a little bit more long-term just because of the money that's being dumped into the economy and the shortage of supplies we have.
Sure.
But I tell our dealers, regardless if it's transitory or long-term, we have to be dealing with it. I started out in the 70s when inflation was going crazy, and I tell all of my dealers the people that did well during inflation were always ahead of the inflation number, not trying to catch up with it. So one of the things that we've really been focusing our dealers on is to look at this. I think we're going to have probably anywhere between a 10 and a 12% inflation number. I was just talking to one of our dealer groups up in Canada, and I think in Canada, if you're following this in Canada there, you're going to be probably in that 5 or 6% inflation number up there. So about half of what ours is. But again, what we have to do is get in front of it. And so what we're looking at is we're asking our people in the parts department, first of all, to look at your margins. Now, we all know that parts have been incrementing up because of the pandemic and shortages and things like this. But what I'm finding as I'm working with my dealers is that while the parts are going up in price, I'm not finding that the dealers' margins are being held on them. So I've been asking my dealers, and I'm going to really challenge everybody to take out of your software, pull up the first 6 months of the year your part sales by vendor. Okay, I don't want to see every part, but I want to see the part sales for, let's say, Bob's Manufacturing.
Wow,
okay?
what an exciting time.
do not buy product from Bob's Manufacturing. Okay. This is one. Call me before you ever sign up for this manufacturer. Well, let's say that Bob's Manufacturer is out there. So I look at January through June of this year, and I look at my sales, and I look at my cost of goods sold, and I say, gosh, Bob's Manufacturer, this year my gross profit margin on parts is averaging 40%.
Sure.
Okay? I want you to go back then and do a comparative for last year during that same period of time, because this is where we're finding the uniqueness. So even though you don't do any changing of your matrices in your software, because none of our dealers have, they're already matrixed up, but we're finding that there's about a 1 to 2% loss in profit margin. So what we're finding is, and this is not in all manufacturers, only in Bob manufacturers.
Oh, okay. All right,
but
there
what
it
we're
is.
finding is the parts pricing is going up, but the dealer cost is exceeding what it was before. So I'm really asking all of my parts managers and my dealerships to take a look at that number and see. That should be the same. We should have the same number there. Now, even if it's the same, if we're going to have a 12% inflation number, we've got to move up our parts margins a little bit to offset some of that, because we're going to have some salary demands at the end of the year that are going to be a little bit unique. So I would really encourage you, number one, to take a look at that. I'm just finding some inconsistencies. There were no changes in our matrixing, yet our margins are down about 1 to 2, and not in all manufacturers. So most of your manufacturers are doing this right, but I'm just finding some odd things that are there. So I'd encourage you to do that.
Well, and we know that you as dealers are wonderfully benevolent people, but this is not the place to be benevolent, okay? We've got to make sure that we are where we need to be, because it goes into our next piece. Let's talk about the labor rates specifically and how we're dealing with the labor rates in our shop right now in the midst of inflation.
So right now we're running at about 6% inflation. Again, my guess is it's going to be between 10 to 12 by the time we get to the end of the year. So I'm just going to use an easy number here. So let's say that your labor rate's $100 an hour. If it's 80, it all calculates.
Well, we are from Missouri, so we have to keep it simple. There it is.
So if we're going to have a 10 or a 12% inflation rate by the end of the year, if you're at $100 an hour in January, but we have, let's say, just a 10% inflation rate, the money that you generate in December is worth 10% less. That's what inflation is, right? It's the devaluation of money, right? It's worth 10% less. So really, your labor rate is only buying what $90 would have bought
Wow.
instead of what $100 would have bought.
Sure.
And so I've had all of my dealers go in and already tweak their labor rates up from where we set them, because we set them earlier in the year, and almost all of the dealers in our dealer success groups are already adding an extra 5% to it. Because again, if you're going to win at inflation, you can't wait till the end of the year and make a 10% adjustment, because you lost all this opportunity to make money back here, because inflation didn't happen in December.
Yeah.
It's happening incrementally every month.
Sure.
So that's the other piece that I would really encourage you to reevaluate that. And again, I have a big group I work with up in Canada, a dealership group up there, and they've done it, and they really haven't. They've had a few people push back, but when they say the same thing, everything's going crazy right now, and the customers go, yeah, you're right, everything's crazy. It's crazy in Canada, it's crazy here in the States also. So again, I would just encourage them to do that. And the reason is, right, because what's going to ultimately happen, if we have inflation where I think we're going to have it at, let's just say it's 10%.
Sure.
Okay, your people, what you've paid them is worth 10% less in December than it was in January.
Right.
The consumer price index here in the States was at 5.5% just for last month. It increased.
Wow.
So you're going to start seeing your employees go, hey, I need to make more money.
That's right.
Because, groceries cost me more, gas is costing me more, and all this stuff. So if you're used to giving out, let's say a 3% cost of living raise, that's kind of the standard, what everybody does, it's not going to work anymore. If you've got a 10 or a 12% inflation rate and the consumer price index is going up, what your people make is going to be worth a lot less in December than it was in January.
Sure.
So we know how hard it is to find employees.
Yes.
Is everybody aware of it? Okay. And so if you're having trouble to find employees, the last thing I want to do is lose any good ones I have, because I don't want them to go say, man, I got to find a place I can make more money. So what we've got to do is index our employees' salaries up some. And most of the dealers I won't say most, all the dealers that we're working with in our DSG programs have already had this conversation with their employees and saying, hey, look, we are aware of this, and we're going to be taking care of that and start to increment you up in your salaries. I want to keep them. I don't want them out looking someplace else. So my gut is you're probably going to have to move, instead of a 3% cost of living thing, I think you're going to have to be probably to a 6 or a 7% to keep yourself even competitive with salaries. But,
right, and I was going to say, the thing that most of these dealers are going to do is say, I'll just take it out of my own pocket. That is the worst thing we can do right now.
That's why you don't take it out of your own pocket. We increment it up. That's why, again, I'm saying, let's move our labor rate up. Let's pick up some extra profit now. Because we're going to have this demand on us here. And the same thing over in parts. On the whole goods side, they're all doing okay, right? Everybody dealer that we work with is probably 2 or 3% better in their whole goods margins than they were even last year. So whole goods is kind of taking care of itself, but parts and service is critical.
Well, and as you look at the service department specifically, now in the midst of season is the time to do this anyways, all right? So people are just saying, when do I get my unit back? They just say, I don't really care about the cost. So if we're going to start moving this up, now is the time to do this anyway. So the 3 things, just to recap: number 1, focus on your margins on parts. Take an objective look from January to June of this year and relook at last year's. Number 2, labor rate. Start raising that up for us. And then 3rd, start coming up with a plan to make sure that our employees are taken care of. As Bob said, the last thing we want to do is lose anybody right now, especially good people. If you have bad people, that's like a whole different conversation. There's counseling afterwards. No, we're not qualified for that. But we've got to make sure that we keep the good people, because we don't want to lose them. And so as we look at inflation and what that looks like with payroll as we go forward, now is the time to come up with a plan and start implementing it.
And don't buy anything from Bob's Manufacturing.
And don't.
Very shady company.
So shady. All right. Thank you, guys. If you have questions, shoot us an email, info@bobclements.com.
Thanks.